Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host Greg Tompsett along with my partner in crime, the divisional round playoff representative Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how does it feel to be in the divisional round for the first time in 25 years?
Amazing. Everything in my football life feels great, but I'm super annoyed. My kids lost my little clicker that turns my light on my cool sign on. Can't find it anyway. Those little freaking brats. Yeah. No, but everything else in my life feels great that the Bills are good. I honestly, guys, we talked about it last week, playing with that little house money here. I have way less anxiety and panic about this game. I'm ready to talk about this game where last week I was just a ball of anxiety. So let's get this on, man.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've had that conversation with a couple different fans about, like, some are like, no, the further we go, the more ratcheted up the anxiety gets. And I was like, yeah, don't get me wrong, it matters more, but like they've achieved some things. So the drop off, if they lose as you go forward is less because they've already achieved some of those things. So yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. Tonight's show presented by our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's. Appreciate everything that they do. Our sponsors from West Her. And tonight, in order to talk a little bit more about the opponent in this division round from the Baltimore Ravens representation, our friend, and you may see him online, Cole Jackson, RSR Cole Jackson of the Russell Street Report. Cole, how are we doing?
I'm doing good, buddy. I got to agree with Aaron. Getting that Lamar Jackson hasn't won a playoff game off of out of my ears on Twitter has been just a godsend, and it feels
it was my first comeback every time.
He hasn't won a playoff game. You're not wrong, but now you are. So now it's going to be, well, Lamar Jackson can't win. Now it's Lamar Jackson can't play in the snow, so that's been fun. But I'm doing good, buddy. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm glad. I always say I'm up in Canada, so it's Buffalo's close to home. A lot of my buddies are Bills fans. I've always had a ton of respect for the fans and the team. And, I found last year you guys were built a lot like us, lights out defense, quarterback that was developing, and, Josh Allen's takes some major steps. So it's been a lot of fun to go back and watch that film, but I'm ready to break it up with you guys.
No, that's awesome. Talking through that a little bit, obviously super similar. I think you touched on it right, that, the young quarterbacks, it was a little bit more defense, then it was shifting into the offense kind of a year after that enormous step forward that Lamar took. Josh did that this year. How has it been? You talk a little bit about that matchup with the Titans and how we got that first win, and now what it's like in the fan base that you've now transitioned from that, probably the same way we were, maybe that little defensive element of, no, hey, come on, it's not like that. There was reasons for that stuff, and now all of a sudden it's okay. We're past that, and now switching into this next gear of what comes next.
Well, it was funny, like last week on Twitter, and like Lamar hates the Titans, the Ravens hated the Titans, there was a logo stomp, everything was all this hostility, and now we're going into Bills week, and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson are playing tummy sticks with one another with their comments in the pregame, and so it's been a completely different vibe. But for me, like I've always tried to just take a step back from the comments and focus on the film, trust what my eyes see me. There were so many myths and narratives out there about Lamar Jackson, and I watched a ton of Josh Allen coming out of Wyoming because I knew we were kind of looking at the quarterback position in that 2018 draft. Didn't think we'd end up with Allen. Obviously, he wasn't even close to us. But it was the same thing with Josh Allen. He had a ton of these false narratives around him, and it's tough when you spend so much time actually watching the film, and I know you guys can resonate with this. And then you spend half your time, rather than it's having productive conversations, it's fighting with people that just say things like, he can't throw deep, he can only run, and it's just like nonstop. So I completely understand what you guys are going through, because that was me last year. It was one of my favorites was Jeff Schwartz in the Miami game, week 1. Lamar goes off for 4 or 5 touchdowns, and his first thing, like halfway through the second quarter, he just goes, "I was wrong about Lamar Jackson." I was like, "You got out on that one quick, man." So I know you guys. I always say I keep the receipts, so I know you guys probably had them piled up too on the naysayers about Josh Allen.
I got kind of playing off of that because Sean McDermott addressed a little bit of it today in his press conference, talking about how, the Baltimore Ravens had a vision for Lamar Jackson in that franchise. And Bill, same thing, had a vision for Josh Allen. And I think you talked about some of the things that people saw in film as flaws, where these two organizations saw the opposite. They saw what they could work with. Bills, this is sort of a new thing for us to have people with some kind of foresight and ability to develop players and to have this type of vision 2-3 years down the road. For the Baltimore Ravens, this has been sort of business as usual for the last decade here in Baltimore. What is it about, this is something I asked when we had Levon Kirkland on with the Steelers. I look at the Ravens, see the same thing. Just, it doesn't matter. I go back and look through this team and the names just pop off the chart, and you guys are able to get guys that fit what you're doing, develop players in-house. What is it about this Baltimore Ravens organization that allows them to just have vision for players that are going to come in, fit, and be the best versions of themselves, as our coach likes to say?
I think the big thing is continuity. John Harbaugh has been around since 2008. Not many head coaches are getting that type of tenure, especially in this league. John Harbaugh takes a lot of criticism for being a CEO coach because he lets his coordinators do their thing. He doesn't strap them to a certain scheme or we're going to play traditional West Coast offense. We've changed a lot of our philosophy. But to give an example around the identity, like, he's always kind of had a more aggressive defensive coordinator, with the exception being Dean Pease, where he was a little bit more conservative. He played a little bit more of that Tampa 2 style cover 2 defense. But, you go back to Rex Ryan, Chuck Pagano. Now we have Wink Martindale. They love to bring heat. They love the organized chaos. So I think it really goes around the team culture. And I think that's been the biggest struggle with us since sort of 2014 when, Joe Flacco really started to decline. We were able to kind of support the team with a good defense, but we were always kind of stuck on that we were a playoff contender, but, we couldn't get in a lot of years. Like, there was the 2016 meltdown, the 2017 meltdown in Cincy, which got you guys in. Mm-hmm. That was, I remember I was going out for New Year's Eve. It was on New Year's Eve, 1 p.m. game, dinner reservations at 7. And I just sat at the dinner table the whole night with tears in my eyes. Well, my Bills fans buddies are chirping me. But,
yeah, I don't feel bad about that one.
Yeah,
that one I don't feel bad about.
So I think the big thing is, it's the play like a Raven mentality. And I think John Harbaugh has done a really good job in instilling that continuity. I know it sounds super cliche to have that type of mentality, but I mean, that's how they've done it. And they've had a great set of GMs. Ozzie Newsome kept Eric DeCosta around he used to go for a GM interview every year. And so, they just kept infusing young talent in the pipeline, and they did great with player acquisitions. Traditionally, we're a good draft team, a stretch of rough years, but now they're bouncing back. But I really think it sticks. It comes back to that identity fostered by our head coach that's been around for over a decade now.
No, I mean, I think it's nice to see that, and even you see the opposite here, where New England wasn't able to do that with Nick Caserio, where it was kind of obvious that Belichick doesn't have 10 more years left, so at some point here that's coming, and you see some of those guys go. So Newsome's ability to keep that together and have DeCosta ready to hand off for that stretch is fantastic. And now the Bills are finally in a spot where things like culture and all those football guy cliches that get put out there in the press conferences, we used to roll our eyes and laugh all the time, and now we bathe in them. It's hysterical about that. We know we're not going to get anything material out of these press conferences. We know they're not going to share anything or talk through anything. It's all going to be there. But then you see some of the players come through with, that McDermott even goes away from some of the football guy cliches with wanting people to love each other and like to genuinely care about the guy next to him. And they actually like share life stories and like why you play football, why this matters to you, so that when you're out there and deciding whether you want to give that little bit extra, you know why, because you're doing it for that guy next to you, that you know about him and you know why he's out here and why he's grinding and doing those things. Those things can seem cheesy, they can seem, just frivolous and not real, but it's not an accident that some of those teams that genuinely build that culture are able to succeed like that. And it's exciting to now finally be on the other side of that coin. Instead of rolling our eyes, we're like, no, it's kind of real.
Can we just
I mean, any podcast right now that's doing if you look at any podcast that's doing player interviews, it really comes out in those podcasts. I find, like, I listen to Spit and Chicklets hockey podcasts all the time, and those players get into this stuff, and I don't think we truly understand what it means. But I mean, listen to the players talk about it. Like, some of these guys are retired. There's no point in lying, but they always go there, right? There was that, culture of accountability. That's another cliche that you hear. But, when I listen to, Chris Versteeg getting interviewed and he's talking about the Blackhawks and how they fostered that, I mean, it mattered, right? Like, so we always look at them as cliches, but they definitely matter.
Can we collectively for a second celebrate how Andy Reid's coaching tree is so much better than Bill Belichick's coaching tree, and the people that branch off from it, just fantastic.
Dominating this playoffs. He's like half the playoffs.
Yeah, we got David Culley's our passing game coordinator, assistant head coach, and he just got interviewed by, I forget which team, but he just got interviewed for a head coaching position too, and so that's a couple with Baltimore from Andy Reid's tree.
Well, why don't we dive right into the Bills offense against Baltimore defense?
Yeah, so first of all, we do a lot of defensive interviews here when we have podcasters on, and I'm going through and I'm saying, hey, I don't recognize a lot of these names, but that doesn't mean the defense isn't good, right? Like, when you look at the scheme they play as a scheme, going through every level of this Baltimore defense, there are game-changing players at every level of this defense. I think people have had such a high expectation of what a Baltimore Ravens defense looks like every year that this year I think they were a little bit quiet and not on a lot of team or player fans' radars in terms of how good they actually are. Can you, before we kind of dive into this game, can you talk about the type of season that they had? What changed along the defense? Why did they kind of go under the radar up until late in the year and to this point in the year?
I mean, the big thing I think people don't realize about the Ravens 2019 season was, it was historic in a lot of ways in terms of how good their offense was, but they were very lucky in the injury column. We didn't go through a ton of them. And this year has been the complete opposite. We lost Tavon Young, our slot corner. That happened in 2019, and that's when you saw Marlon Humphrey running out of the slot. And, we had Jimmy Smith and then traded for Marcus Peters and made that adjustment midseason to give us that 3 cornerback tandem. But we still didn't have your traditional slot corner. We were using our best kind of spotlight cornerback in the slot out of necessity. We didn't have the depth there. And then what happens this year? We lose Tavon Young. We also lost Brandon Williams and Calais Campbell for a bunch of games. So I think the big thing for me watching the progression of the defense is they brought in a lot of new blood. Calais Campbell was a huge addition. We've been hoping to have him here for years. He was always that kind of, we should trade for him. Even when he was in Arizona, Baltimore fans were claiming or wanting him. And I think a lot of it goes to that assimilation period, not having a normal training camp. It's tough to get guys in. And now that they've kind of gotten healthy and guys are back, I think you're starting to see the dividends pay out. But the other thing is, like, you made a good point about Baltimore defense reputation, expectations. Patrick Queen gets dragged. You see it all over PFF. He's got like a 32, technically should be cut. But that's a lot of Baltimore fans are so used to watching, a guy like Ray Lewis that came in and just was dominant for, over a decade. Right. And so I think getting used to developing a young inside linebacker, Patrick Queen's shown a ton of flashes. He's also shown a ton of reasons why he's a 21-year-old, newer guy. He didn't even start the whole season at LSU last year. So a lot of it comes back to that. And I think the big thing was getting healthy at the right time. It happened, right around the Cleveland game. And then they kind of, through the last 5 games, were able to kind of gel as a healthy unit. And you saw it on Sunday when, they came out, everyone's full strength on that defensive line. They've been in the system for 16 games, and they were able to finally put it all into action. So that I think was huge. And the other thing I think Baltimore did a good job of was adding in some veterans like Pernell McPhee. McPhee had 20 snaps on Sunday. 10 of them were run snaps. 5 of the 10 ended in a run stop, like a solo tackle. So, I mean, and he's 32. He played for us in the first Super Bowl run. Chicago paid him, and then he came back. So, I mean, it was those veteran additions to the young guys, I think, were a huge addition. So I think I hate to blame injuries because it is kind of a loser excuse, but I think it's more the assimilation period, getting guys healthy, and now we're able to just go out and kind of execute what they've been working on all year.
All that makes a ton of sense. And Bills kind of struggled with that early too, with injuries and new veteran guys. And I tell our fans all the time that the DVOA rankings are a little bit, deflated from early in the season when all that gelling and stuff was happening. So that makes total sense. Let's stay on that defensive line and sort of work our way back through this defense here, because this is what scares me the most about this matchup. I'm not going to lie. And I think a lot of people look at the Ravens' ability to blitz, and that's great. And I like that they have that ability to be aggressive in blitz. I think Josh Allen does a pretty good job actually this year at handling the blitz, and that puts a lot of pressure on that back end. So that isn't as much a worry for me as just the defensive line with some of the simulated pressures that we're going to see in the stunt games that they play with those veterans along the front of the line. And you add in those linebackers that come in. Judon's kind of really a hybrid. He's all over the place. You see some of these stunts. That one against Tannehill last week was a beautiful representation of what's keeping me up at night, where Wolf comes free. Nobody even touches him. And it's not, I think what fans don't understand is that's playing off whatever look the offensive line gives you at the time. So there's a lot of built-in things that can happen in real time, and they're just so good at communicating and knowing what the other is going to do that when the offensive line picks their poison, you're right there with an answer. And we talk all the time about Josh Allen and Brian Daboll having answers to the questions that the defense presents, but your defensive line's doing that, in response to an offensive line. How do you see them using that against Buffalo to try to keep Josh Allen, one, in the pocket and keep him, with pressure in his face all day long?
So that what you just said, I think, is one of the key things, because what I've noticed with a guy like Judon is he tends to freelance a little bit, and when he does that, he leaves open a contain lane, and he loses his contain lane, and that's what I noticed the most rewatching the Colts game is anytime Allen gets a time to get outside the pocket, he throws on the run really well. And the Bills receivers are one of the best in the business right now at working their way back to the ball. So it's funny that you say that's what keeps you up at night, because what I'm worried about is generating a four-man rush. It's been a struggle in Baltimore for years. Honestly, since we lost Terrell Suggs to have a reliable pass rush, I think that's why they brought in Yannick Ngakoue mid-season. I think that's why they paid to bring in Calais Campbell. They started using McPhee on the inside a little bit more. He's the one that set up that pick for Derek Wolfe. He just came down and banged down on the double team and Wolfe loops. And so I think the big thing is one thing I haven't seen the Ravens use, which I was shocked, is using stunts with Yannick and Campbell, which they did really well in Jacksonville together. I think we all kind of went back to that Jacksonville trade when we signed it, or back to that Jacksonville tape when we traded for him, and we were like, oh my God, look at the things we can do, and we haven't seen it yet. And I don't know if that's something that Wink was kind of keeping on the shelf for a big game. That wasn't really the Titans game to me. It was all about stopping Derrick Henry and forcing Tannehill to kind of be more of a drop back passer without the run. This is the complete opposite game plan for me. It's more about it's not that Wink Martindale's going to blitz. He's going to bring. I think if you go back to the pressure stats, we brought 4 or 5 on every single play in 2019, and I think we sacked Allen 6 times. But Josh Allen's progress against the blitz, his ability to get the ball out quick, make a quick read, his decisiveness, which I think hasn't been talked about much outside of probably your fan base. I think those are the key difference makers. When the Colts had their most success against Josh Allen, it was when they could get quicker pressure. It's really going to come down to that 4-man rush, because I have concerns about using simulated blitzes against them. I think we're just going to get picked apart. Now, one thing I do think Martindale will do a little bit better than other defensive coordinators that have played Buffalo this year is that he tends to play man coverage behind that blitz. And so I think, having this, I know we'll get into the secondary after, but I think we kind of have the secondary to hold up a bit better to allow our guys to get home. But for me, it's all about, taking advantage of, I think the tackles they have in Buffalo are fantastic. They've done a great job in pass protection from the games I've watched. It's really about, I want to see Calais Campbell lined up as a 4-tech. I want to see Pernell McPhee on the other 4-tech and taking advantage of those guards, because Mitch Morse is going to have to help one of them, and whoever doesn't get the help is going to have the one-on-one. So I think it's getting that pressure up the middle, but then going back to earlier, it's keeping those contained lanes and not letting Allen get outside. So I have some concerns with Judon on the outside. I've complained about him about 500 times about that this year, but
we're happy to take him off your hands if you're going to just keep it there.
This is the game you traded for Yannick Ngakoue for, in my opinion. You traded for him to come in and make an impact. He's been if we were playing a game of hand grenades, Yannick Ngakoue would be the MVP. He's been close so many times. It's time for close to finally become results-oriented in this one.
Absolutely. I now want to talk about this linebacking core. We talked about Judon kind of a lot as part of that defensive line, but let's talk about this linebacking core, because this is actually the spot where I think the Bills have a chance to actually take advantage of this Ravens defense. And we saw Eric and Nate did a great film room. So if any fans out here, if you haven't seen the film room they did last night, fantastic stuff breaking down Allen's game against the Colts. Different scheme. I'm not saying that it's going to be like that, but Allen's ability to manipulate safeties and linebackers, I think is going to be something that he has to take advantage of with these young linebackers. Patrick Queen, you talked about. I think I've seen some flashes watching, but I have also seen some opportunities for Josh Allen and the step that he's taken this year in that ability to manipulate, in that ability to kind of move guys out of the way with his eyes. I think there's going to be some spots here. Is that a concern of yours as well? I see you shaking your head, so it seems like it's probably a concern of yours as well. And then, what do you think that the Ravens can do to sort of provide a safety net for their linebackers so that doesn't happen?
Well, one thing I'd like to know is you guys have Stephon Diggs, and somehow I'm the most worried about Cole Beasley in this game. No, you're absolutely right. We've been getting killed in the middle of the field this year. Andy Reid picked them apart I can't go back and watch the game. It gives me PTSD. So I just avoid it now. So I think over the middle is going to be tough. I think they can use some of those crossing routes that Beasley does. Him on third down is going to be a pain in the arse. One thing I think Baltimore can do, they can use Chuck Clark, their strong safety. Deshaun Elliott he's their other safety. He's had a good year. He's better in run support. And unfortunately, kind of so is Clark. So I think they'll get a little bit of safety help, but what I do expect them to do, they brought in J-Ron Curse from the Lions. I think you'll see a lot of dime looks where they're bringing in 3 safeties and they can also use Jimmy Smith in that role too, and use Anthony Averett as their other cornerback. So the other thing is, going back to the injury point, we got some of our corners back and healthy. I think what they can do is use corners as safeties, which they have done a ton of with Jimmy Smith this year. I always said they wanted to bring him back as like the Travis Kelce matchup, right? Like they want a corner on a tight end. I think they can kind of use that inside to help out Patrick Queen, LJ Fort, Malik Harrison, those guys. But it's absolutely an opportunity sitting there for Buffalo. One thing sitting in Queen's favor, he does have a knack for the ball. He's given up a lot of plays. He's also made plays. So, that's kind of the hope that I sit with, but it's definitely, I think that's where we're the weakest is middle of the field from that 5 to 15 yard intermediate range.
Now let's get right into it, because I think the matchup that I'm most excited to see outside of, what Josh Allen can do on his own is these receivers versus your cornerbacks, because I think the Bills have faced some good units this year, but I don't know that they faced one as deep and with one as with the ability to be playmakers that you guys have. And you said it with that type of blitz aggressive play you have. If you have man coverage that can hold up on the other end, that's the recipe, right? Now, we talk a lot on this show, kind of gloating a little bit that we don't know that there's anyone in the league that can guard Stephon Diggs one-on-one. That might not be true this weekend. I think that there's going to be some plays where there's some physicality that Diggs gets held up at the line a little bit, stuff that he's not used to seeing. What is your answer to Stephon Diggs? And then looking at this, you mentioned Cole Beasley. Gabriel Davis just had a nice big game. John Brown had a quiet game, but very well, having had John Brown there, what he's able to do, the depth of this wide receiving room, and even throw in Dawson Knox in there and his ability to stretch the field. Sort of what do you think that group is going to be able to do to stop this potent passing attack from the Bills, and what problems do you think they bring you guys.
To focus on Diggs, I think one thing that gives us a bit of an advantage, we don't always see a lot of spotlight coverage. Jimmy Smith usually plays right cornerback if he's at the cornerback, unless they bring him in as a more dime DB safety role. But I think we can show Diggs a couple of different looks. I always say we kind of have three different starting corners. We got Marlon Humphrey, who's your all-around, all-pro type guy that can just kind of – he had a bit of a rough – he even tweeted about it. He said he had a rough game against A.J. Brown. He saw a ton of Brown, and he did struggle for sure. But, we've seen him lock down anybody. He's locked down people in the slot. He's locked down people outside. And then you can throw Jimmy Smith at him and use a more physical press corner behind that blitz and get right up at him at the line of scrimmage, make him get past you. And then you get Marcus Peters, who's kind of the big risk, big reward type guy. It tests some of these technical runners because sometimes he just reads that route running ability so well and he jumps the route. So I think that's one of the advantages that they have. John Brown is some guy he's just one guy you can't lose. Like, you cannot lose track of him. He'll kill you. That was one thing he did really well in Baltimore when he was here. Cole Beasley is just a nightmare on third down. He's just always sneaking around. So that's one thing that I'm always looking for. I always say I get worried about tight end matchups because I always find we really need a corner to kind of come in and like a guy like Jimmy Smith to help out. We've struggled against tight ends for years. I think we do match up okay with Dawson Knox. I kind of trust Chuck Clark to kind of take care of Knox in that regard. But Gabriel Davis is a bit of
if you don't cover him, he might not catch it anyways. It's okay.
So stop it.
Could you imagine if he dropped that one last week against the Colts where he's just kind of like chilling in the end zone? So I think the biggest thing is we have three starting corners, very versatile. The first guy off the bench is Trixie Cole Beasley. The first guy off the bench is Anthony Averett, athletic, can run with guys, a nice guy that they could put out on John Brown to just kind of run with them. So I think the diversity in the cornerback group is what's going to give us the ability to match up with your guys. But I completely agree. It's the, they're so deep. There's so many guys that they can throw out there. We've seen a ton of, not a ton, but we've seen enough of the 4 wide receiver sets where, you got to play dime against it. And that really changes how Wink can do some of those deceptive blitz looks.
So switching over to the other side of the ball, it's a setup where we'll talk about Lamar last in the dynamic danger that he presents. I know coming from the Colts game, we were concerned about how dominant their offensive line was and what was there, and I don't think anyone would say the Ravens are on that level from an offensive line standpoint, but there's a few players who are. Orlando Brown's having a phenomenal year. Makari is really nice, and I think a very underrated center for as good as what he is. Help a little bit with what's going on with this experiment with Fluker and Phillips at right tackle and what's happening there and what they're doing before we get into the running game that you guys are putting together.
If I go back and pull my tweets from the draft, every single tweet says we need an offensive tackle. Every single, and they didn't draft one, of course. They brought in Phillips was brought in, and he was a left tackle at Mississippi State. That guy's a guard, and they started him at guard this year. He started at right guard, and he really struggled with his technique. He was taking kind of the tackle longer stride steps in his pass protection. And, you kind of saw some improvement where he was getting those quicker, choppier steps to kind of mirror inside guys where things are just happening a little bit quicker. And now that he's back at tackle, he's struggling to kind of revert his technique back. So I think that's what's really killing him. He got absolutely dusted by Brooks Reed, who's a practice squad call-up. He just couldn't anchor him. And so it reminded me of Michael Orr. Shout out Sandra Bullock. What's going on at right tackle right now is nothing I've ever seen before, where they're, whether a guy's getting hurt or he's getting benched, they both play every game. And I've just never, I coach youth ball. I've seen it there. I haven't seen it in the NFL, unless it's preseason. So it's been a nightmare. Unfortunately, fortunately for you guys, DJ Fluker is our best option at right tackle. I can trust him. What they started doing when they put in Fluker is they started running their power gap concepts to the right again, which they did a ton of last year because they wanted to get Bradley Bozeman pulling. That allows Fluker to down block a lot. It puts him in a safe spot. He can just go run at someone. Where he struggles is when he gets out in space. Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes are going to give him a hard time in pass protection. I'm just so used to us. I know we're going to struggle from the right side in pass pro. One of the things about the offensive line that has kind of gone unnoticed outside of Baltimore was Ben Powers stepping in as the right guard. He's been phenomenal since he came in. No idea how he didn't start last year out of Oklahoma. He should have been our starting left guard to start the season. He didn't play until mid this year. He's been phenomenal. The additions of him and Kaiir would turn this offensive line around in terms of a run blocking perspective. It's been night and day when those two got in. They're better in space. They get into level 2 better. And if you go back to the first 6 weeks where our run game, we were still churning out 4.1, 4.2 yards a carry, but it wasn't what it was last year. And it was because linebackers were running free everywhere and chasing down Lamar, taking away his effectiveness. And
talk about that a little bit. I know a lot of people are more used to, assuming it was going to be the Mark Ingram show and adding other pieces in. And there was different, obviously injuries play a factor in different portions of the season. As it's come into the tail end of the year, it's really turned into a great tandem with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins, and just kind of that the stereotypical thunder and lightning and the different pieces of what's going on there. Talk about the explosive element that's added with, Edwards playing the hammer and Dobbins breaking some of these really explosive runs that we didn't necessarily see early in the year, but he's really started to find his way as the year's gone on.
I think what you just said is the biggest difference between what we were seeing from Mark Ingram and when J.K. Dobbins started taking more meaningful snaps. Our run blocking still isn't there yet. I think offensive line is going to be a major need for upgrade in the offseason. It's gotten better for sure, but the difference is J.K. Dobbins, Lamar takes so much attention away from the running backs just because he's always drawing attention. And so J.K. Dobbins is getting put in a lot of those one-on-one situations. And that's where he excelled so much at Ohio State, his ability to make guys miss in space. And that's how he's been doing it. They've also, I think, it did get pretty good coverage, but, the Ravens really adapted their scheme this year to the personnel. They stopped going with more veer concepts and more zone blocking on the inside, and they started going gap heavy, gap read. And then they added in that counter bash, which has been absolutely outrageous for them. Like Lamar scored 6 times off of it this year. Like it's just, it's crazy. One thing is the Titans played it well, and the way to stop the Ravens' run scheme right now, in my opinion, is shooting those backside gaps and telling their DBs not to flow. Once you start getting their linebackers flowing, and that's where these level 2 blocks that I mentioned from the offensive line are making the difference. They're just seal blocking guys, and it's opening those rushing lanes, and that's what's really opened the explosive runs. It's not getting in guys' face, driving them down the field. It's using Lamar's deceptiveness to get linebackers flowing, and then just seal blocking them and opening up easy rushing lanes.
Well, let's talk about that for the last piece here on offense. I think that obviously last year you have a historic season with not only the explosiveness running the ball, but historic levels of efficiency passing the ball that just were unsustainable for any quarterback in NFL history. So, of course, there's going to be a little bit of a step back. I think maybe some Bills fans that, the Bills and the Ravens didn't play this year. Depending on what you're watching, you're not necessarily seeing a ton of the games back and forth, very many of them on at the same time. I think some people have the misconception that somehow Lamar Jackson had a bad year or didn't have a good year. He still had a very nice season. And I know, obviously, we're still a little gun shy seeing the, athletic, trio of, Jack Doyle and Trey Burton and Mo Alley Cox tear us up. I'm a little nervous about Mark Andrews this week. So talk a little bit about just the steps that Lamar has taken and what this passing game still represents when the run game gets so much of the attention.
Well, the interesting thing is if you go back to, I keep focusing on the first 6 weeks because it was really poor play from the team all around. They were able to grab wins out of it, but, Lamar Jackson, he really did take a step back to start the season. He was indecisive. He was missing guys deep. a lot of his misses came from just not getting the ball out on time. And if you go back to our game last week, there was a post route to Mark Andrews in the end zone. He's wide open. Ball came out too late, and it's kind of that's been the number one thing. And to look at Lamar's start to that game, like I don't know if you guys saw that interception that he threw. That was the worst throw of Lamar Jackson's career. It was 10 yards inside where he was supposed to throw it. It was actually going to be open because Boykin was in tight, breaking to the sideline. It was just awful, and it's not that he played that bad to start this year. I'm not saying that at all. But it really showed, I think, the mental block that he undertook. I think it was still present in the playoff game, and I don't think he broke it until he broke that big run. The big thing with Lamar passing, and it's one of my number one critiques of Greg Roman, he really needs to get Lamar in a rhythm early, and they did that in the second half Patrick Ricard had 3 catches on one drive. It was absolutely insane. They just attacked the flats. The Titans were sitting off in cover 3, and they just kept hitting the sidelines with easy 7-yard out routes, and that got Lamar in a rhythm, and that's what really opened up their offense. Mark Andrews has all of the. He's so good. He's so athletic. His number one issue is still having a case of concentration drops, and I know you guys can sympathize with.
We've seen it.
Yeah. And so I think that's been a bit of an issue. There was a big debate over a third down pass, whether Kevin Byard knocked the ball out or if it went off Mark Andrews' chest. In my opinion, that one, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. He needs to be able to make those contested catches in big moments, and he's just so good. He needs to make those plays. So one thing that I do think Lamar can do better with Mark Andrews is he needs to get the ball down a little bit better. One thing Lamar does well is he places the ball where only his guy's going to get it, but sometimes that gets Mark Andrews jumping up and taking a lot of contact. So I think he needs to do a better job leading him. He's really developed that ability with Marquise Brown. Those two are finally clicking with their chemistry. I find he hasn't gotten there with Mark Andrews yet. So that's one of the bigger issues there. But I do definitely think Andrews is a bit of a matchup that we can exploit against the Bills linebackers. So yeah, definitely.
So, our man Cole Jackson here from Russell Street Report. Before we get you out of here, give us a prediction in the game. What are you expecting to see on Saturday?
34-31 Baltimore.
No, I wouldn't expect anything less.
I'm expecting a high-scoring game. I think you guys are going to be able to I think there's going to be a lot of explosive plays. I think this is going to be maybe not as crazy as the Cleveland Monday Night Football game. Hopefully no one's off taking a dump in the fourth quarter. But
he needed fluids. Needed fluids.
I think it's tough to say, and I will give myself credit because everyone was saying the Titans game was going to be up in the 30s. I predicted 23-20 Baltimore because I really thought both defenses were going to come prepared. I think both of these defenses are very good. I think this is just one of those divisional round playoff games where the top offense is going to be the one to win it, and I think they're going to come out hot. There's going to be a ton of scoring. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, man. For anybody who's not out there, I'll let the folks know where they can find your work.
So at Cole Jackson RSR on Twitter and Russell Street Report. And then I'm also a guest on Locked On Ravens as part of the Locked On Network.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you. Hopefully we have a good, entertaining, fun game on Saturday night. I hope you're not right, but I'm looking forward to a fun and exciting game. Everybody make sure you're checking out Cole's work. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks a lot, guys. Stay safe. Man. Be well.
Appreciate it.
You too.
So, obviously, Cole's the guy who knows his stuff and really gets into the X's and O's of what we're watching here and how we're being able to kind of dive into the game. And it's tough because I think the guys in the chat even were following along with what's there. He's realistic about the areas that they have some shortcomings and don't have great matchups, but he knows that there are some areas where they match up really well with the Bills. And you and Eric and I in our chat, our DMs going back and forth, there is some stuff that's concerning on Saturday in this matchup.
Yeah, and I don't think it takes any film experts to see where the Ravens have ability to break this game loose, and that I think is the scary thing for a lot of Bills fans, and why you're seeing a lot of nervousness in this fan base. This is a good team. It's a good team that's been good for a long time, and now they've got a dynamic quarterback. Again, they have the vision for exactly how they want to use him, and it's reaped nothing but really success and more quickly than we had with Josh Allen. So it's going to be an interesting game. But just like there's opportunities for them, I think there are more opportunities for the Bills than maybe people are seeing or giving the Bills credit for too. This is one of the most prolific offenses in the NFL. That matters. We're constantly having these conversations of what matters in the NFL right now. How do you win in the NFL right now? Well, the Bills have kind of built in the format of how we're told NFL success is built. Prolific passing game, stopping the pass. You can give up some on the run. Unfortunately, now you're facing a team that has turned the clock backwards in what used to be a successful pattern, and they have achieved
back-to-back 3,000-yard rushing seasons. Hasn't been done in 40 years.
So if there's a team that's going to beat a team built with the modern way of winning football games, it's a team built in the total opposite manner philosophically, and that's I tweeted it out earlier. I think that's the most interesting part of this game is you have two good organizations. There's a lot of similarities. Two young quarterbacks with narratives about them, dual threat quarterbacks, but the philosophical differences in both offense and defense really couldn't be further from each other. And I'm interested to see how it plays out, because I think there's a lot of narratives of what is successful in the NFL. And I think this is going to be one of those games that really proves one side or the other. So I think both have valid arguments, and I can't wait to see how this game plays out, man.
No, I agree completely. And it's going to be really interesting to see. I'm actually going to pivot here and move into a segment that we normally do later, but I think it's a good time to talk about it. Cover One's excited to announce that we've welcomed a new contributor to our fold, Max Robleski. You guys may see him out in the Twitter sphere as at Mafia Numbers. Make sure you're finding him and giving him a follow. So Max Robleski at Mafia Numbers. He shared some things that are interesting here, and I know a lot of what we saw from last year and what's been talked about. Eric and I went back and forth on a couple things of, is it actually good that the Bills are playing a man defense this week? Does it matter when it's one of the best man defenses in the NFL? Josh has awesome numbers against the blitz. Well, they're the best blitzing team, or the highest rate blitzing team in the NFL. And it really has to do with whether they get home on those things. So last year, obviously, you talk about Josh versus cover zero. He was 31st in the NFL with a 30.8% completion percentage, yards per attempt at 2.3, 31st in the NFL, success rate 21.4, 34th in the NFL, EPA per play negative 14.5, 36th in the NFL. None of those games were as amplified as the game against the Ravens. This year, that moves to, he had 71.4% against cover zero, 4th in the NFL. His yards per attempt at 4.8, 9th in the NFL. His success rate at 63.6, 4th in the NFL. His EPA per play at 4.6, 8th in the NFL. Each of those things, I'll tweet those graphics out after the show here in references. You guys can see some of Max's great work. It's going to be the crux of this game, because again, this year, the Ravens were the best cover zero team in the NFL. They blitzed more than anyone else, and people had more negative plays against them than anyone in the NFL. It is the ultimate, immovable object and irresistible force. It's going to be the thing they're the best at versus the thing we're the best at, and can Josh overcome what they're really good at with how much he's improved? It's going to decide the game.
Yeah, honestly, when you look at all the numbers, I kind of jokingly tweeted out about even just points per game and what their defense allows and what the Bills' offense scored across the board, DVOA, all these numbers. It's a seesaw of different numbers, and it's going to be, in this cover zero conversation specifically, because I know that's one people are really worried about. If anyone's going to have the answer to the Ravens defense, it's going to be Josh Allen. But on the vice versa, if anyone's going to have the answer to stopping Josh Allen with that type of defense, it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens. So if you take our fan hats off and are just football fans and want to see, again, philosophical differences going at it, stylistic differences going at it, all the season successes that each team has had and how they kind of counterbalance each other, just raw football fandom, this matchup is probably the best we've seen in the NFL this year of these two teams, because something's got to give on all these types of, whether it's cover zero, whether it's points per game, whether it's, how the Bills, deep vertical passing game work this year. All these things, something's going to have to give. Either, the Ravens are going to come out and dominate that. The Bills are going to get some explosive plays. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. This is one of the few games I've had a really tough time sort of getting a read on. We know that there's ways to exploit these things, but if anybody can make up for those ways, it's going to be this Ravens defense, and they've done it here now for 17 weeks. So it's not like we're week 4 where you're seeing these numbers and all that stuff can change. We're pretty deep. These teams are who they are, and they just match up in a really interesting fashion.
So one of the pieces, the one area that I think there's a legitimate difference or advantage for Buffalo is what they've been tested against. The strength of schedule between the two teams and the gauntlet that they faced were very, very different. The Bills had the 5th hardest schedule, played a ton of double-digit win teams, played a ton of playoff teams. The Ravens had the 28th ranked schedule, played very few double-digit win teams, very few playoff teams. A lot of their dominating performances were against a stretch where they had 6 straight teams now drafting in the top 8 in the draft. And they did dominate them, which is what you're supposed to do, but it's going to be interesting to see where that comes out. And one of the things that Mafia Mom, which is just a fantastic screen name, congratulations on an awesome screen name. The Ravens are the number 1 blitzing team. It doesn't necessarily yield as much as it has in previous years. Now, I think that's a little deceiving depending on which metric you look at. Some of that might be impacted by the rate and the amount of times that they blitz. Maybe it waters that down a little bit. I will say it's not necessarily as dominant as in years past, and I think some of that is Wink Martindale knowing that, acknowledging that maybe it's not going to be individually dominant in that he has to scheme some of that up, and some of that is sending a blitz on literally more than 50% of their plays in some areas. Eric pointed out a couple of metrics where they were just blitzing on 3rd down at an insane rate. And then you flip it around to Josh's performance. People have thrown around. He does have pretty phenomenal numbers against man coverage, pretty phenomenal numbers against the blitz, but everyone is bad against pressure. So that is the deciding factor. When they send extra guys in blitz, does it turn into pressure? Does it pressure Josh into bad throws, into get sacks and him trying to fight his way out of sacks and the challenges that can bring? Just like the idea of, can Josh convert against man coverage, whether he has the time to it or not? That little half second of does a blitz become a pressure could decide this game.
Absolutely, and the hurries is a tough. Not all pressures are the same.
Yeah.
Thing, right? And so even when you're sending a blitz, sometimes we talk about this a lot with Josh Allen, and this year he hasn't had really struggles with it in the same way. But even if it's something that makes him think a half second longer, or has to, make calls at the line to get his offensive line in the right position because he's not sure what's coming. And that's where I think they might get into trouble with some of the simulated stuff. I know we were saying they blitz a lot, but some of that simulated stuff is going to make Josh think something's happening. And Eric and Nate were talking a lot about, there's a lot of frustration on Twitter with how often the Bills were running. Well, a lot of those were Josh checking out of a play, right? Those were him looking at what the defense was giving him. And I think the Ravens are going to try to get Josh out of some of the passing plays that Daboll is calling by giving certain looks where he believes that it's going to be more advantageous to run and he's going to call into the run, or vice versa, whatever it is. They're going to try to play some of that chess match pre-snap to sort of make Josh think something's coming that's not coming. And I think that's still the path. We haven't seen it really work with much success. Josh has pretty much had the answers, but I think Martindale is going to give Dable and Josh some challenging questions where Dable's going to have those answers installed for Josh, and Josh has to make the right read, and he doesn't always do it. But the Bills haven't necessarily failed when he makes those wrong reads. Obviously, people were frustrated with the 3 runs and punt, but again, some of that was Josh checking out of a play Dayball called into the run. So there's going to be a chess match within the game here between Dable and Martindale that we won't see on the broadcast, but Eric will break it down for us later. And those are some of the things that concern me, where it's not just, okay, they're blitzing and the pressure. It's what's that blitz setting up later? What are these looks setting up that Josh is going to see that he's thinking he's going to take advantage of, but they're going to try to take away?
Yeah. A couple combination of questions here. So Mafia Mom asking about concerned about defensive holding and illegal contact. They are a very physical cornerback group, and I'm assuming that the referees will set the tone for that early on. In the Colts game, they allowed a fair amount of contact. The Bills benefited from some of it. There were plays where the Colts were looking for DPI calls that they did not get that could have been called on a few of those plays. And Ryan coming in here, appreciate your generosity. Thanks, means man. A lot. I actually talked about this with Eric and Aaron, that I'm going to make the call that I think Marcus Peters, and Cole touched on it, he is their risk-reward guy. I think he's going to try to jump a route for Josh Allen and is going to underestimate Josh's arm strength. And it's going to turn into one of those plays where you see Stephon Diggs, on a quick out route or on a quick hook, and he gets it and is able to turn up field without a defender there because Peters tried to jump it and just isn't going to be able to grasp how strong Josh's arm is, and it's going to be too early, or it's going to be too late because it's already by him, and Diggs is going to get a good run after catch on one of those. It's just going to be whether the safeties are there, whether it's a touchdown or not. But I anticipate one of those. But it's also not crazy that he could, if they get him, if Martindale confuses Josh a little bit and they get him unsure of where it's going, Peters is the kind of guy that could jump one and try to take it the other way, and that could be a game-changing play with the kind of shootout this could turn into.
I think Peters is going to get his hands on some balls, whether he comes down with them or not. I think he does get his hands on some Allen's throws. Pick on, I would not say that really any of these guys are somebody that the Bills are just going to go out and pick on. When I think of a DB getting picked on, it's even maybe some of the games we've seen from Taron Johnson where you don't throw at Tre'Davious White and you just go 4 or 5 straight passing plays at a guy. I don't think the Ravens have that. I think the thing that plays into the Bills' strength in this game is Josh Allen's ability to spread the ball around and keep all those guys in the game and involved, because I don't think there's a guy that's going to, Stephon Diggs is not going to get open every play in this game, and you're going to have to pick and choose your spots to go to him. But there's always going to be somebody open, and Allen's going to have to find him. But I don't think they have a guy right now. Maybe some of the safety matchups with, I think Dawson Knox might be able to work some of those safety matchups in his favor. But I don't see a guy that is necessarily going to get picked on in that traditional sense.
I know you did some work on this. Question from Joe Nelson: can our O-line match up against their D-line?
On the outsides. I don't think, after seeing what both Dawkins and Williams have been able to do against the best in the league. We've
better
seen
edge defenders.
Yeah, we've seen Bosa, we've seen Watt. Bosa had a big game, but Watt didn't. They don't have that on the edge. I don't think that they're going to get much of that. I like Yannick, but he's not either one of those guys at this point. Yeah. The interior line scares me, guys. It really does. I don't think it's being talked about enough in the media. I think that they get a little bit of a pass here. I'm not sure John Feliciano, this is going to sound terrible, but I don't think he's much of an improvement over where Brian Winters was when he was in. And he was not good. I'm not saying, I'm not defending Brian Winters here, but you don't hear about it with Feliciano as much as we heard the complaining about Winters. I think he was just an easy scapegoat, but Feliciano has really struggled over these last few games, and I'm concerned. Bacher's, he's fine. He's had a couple nice games, but it hasn't been consistently good. It's putting a lot of pressure on Mitch Morse to really help these guys out, and he's done a pretty good job this year. I like Morse, but everyone's talking. There was a YouTube comment, and I hope you're watching again, because they were talking about me defending these running backs on the Bills, and I think the Bills have average running backs. I don't think they have world beaters at running back, but they're good enough to be productive in the NFL. The problem with the running game is the interior. offensive line. And
100%.
this would be a game if you had a better interior offensive line that you could get something going in the running game. I think that would be a good way to attack this defense. I just don't know that they're reliable enough to get some holes for Devin Singletary. I think Singletary's fine. He's the same guy he was last year. He flashes those abilities on film. Just there really is nothing when they're running behind the guards. It just has been pretty ugly. We saw it on a few of the QB runs that Eric highlighted. So no, my answer is no. I think that their defensive line is going to win more battles against our offensive line than we'd like to see.
So as we kind of pivot in here for a player spotlight, obviously it's been the huge topic of conversation since the game against Colts, the injury to Zach Moss. It's been confirmed. We talked about it post-show that it didn't look good. It's been confirmed he's out for the playoffs. We haven't heard anything as far as surgery or anything like that. So, obviously everyone's looking. Who is that guy that steps up? So first, do you anticipate that the answer to this question is someone who plays a significant role in offense? And then who do you think it's going to be amongst now 3 players that it could come from?
Yeah, no, somebody, I forget who now, and I wish I could credit them. When we were having this conversation on Twitter, somebody said there's so much noise about somebody that's going to get 8 snaps on offense that it's kind of crazy. Yeah, no, I don't think it's going to be, hopefully it's not a significant role, because if it's a significant role, that means either Devin's done something terrible, like fumble the ball away, or he's gotten hurt as well. So I think Devin is going to be sort of the workhorse running back. Yeah. I think he's done a good enough job handling pressure this year when he knows what to do, when he knows his assignment, that they're going to trust him to be out there enough. I just lean towards, I think it's going to be Yeldon. I think they have enough experience with him in games that mattered, that they trust in that, and coaches' trust matters. And people have wanted Dane Jackson all year long. And I like Dane Jackson too. I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in camp next year. But ultimately, the coaches have more trust in what they've seen on film in games with a Levi Wallace, with a Josh Norman. And that just matters. And whether or not you think it does, coaches need to have guys out on the field that they know their assignments. Whether or not they can execute them better than the guy behind them, I don't know that it matters as much as knowing what you're supposed to do, being accountable for what you're supposed to do. And yeah, a lot of people are on the Antonio Williams thing, and those runs were fun, guys, but pass protection matters. Yeah. The context of what he did that in matters. It's such a small sample size. And I'll tell you what, if you think his sample size was fantastic, you should see the 7
yards per carry. 10
carries for 70 yards by TJ Yeldon is even better. So yeah. I think TJ Yeldon gets it, but I don't think we see a lot of whoever is behind in this game.
Yeah, so I think Devin Singletary plays 80% of snaps plus. I think that he is the workhorse back for the game. I don't know that Antonio Williams can't pass protect. I will say,
I don't know.
Pass protection is something that very often comes as you mature in the league, and veterans often are better pass protectors than undrafted rookies. The work that Antonio Williams put up in the second half of that game, when the Dolphins were already getting blown out and were already making their plans for vacation after the season was over, was impressive. It still was a pretty limited sample size. And like you said, TJ Yeldon literally has a better limited sample size and better yards per carry and better yards per touch if we're going to extrapolate out these small sample sizes.
Yeah, right.
The adding into the mix with Devontae Freeman is interesting. He had a game earlier this year where he was added to the practice squad on a Monday or Tuesday and played in the game and started on Sunday. So, I mean, there is precedent that this could happen. He did it for the Giants, 3/4 of the way through the season. I don't anticipate that being the case, but I will say running back is a little more feasible to do that than receiver. There's less of a chemistry issue. There's less of a understanding of the nuances of the route tree and the timing that goes into that. I don't think it's impossible that Devontae Freeman is that backup running back. He is an exceptional pass protector. He does have some juice left. We saw some nice highlights of his time with the Giants. My guess is that it's more likely it's TJ Yeldon. And if it's not Yeldon, I think it would be Freeman, not Williams, who would play in the game. But my guess is that all of this talk and all of this discussion is relatively moot, and it's about an 8 to 10 snap game. Maybe there's one highlight screen thrown in there that TJ Yeldon takes for 25 yards and looks fun. For the most part, I expect it to be the Singletary show.
Yeah, I agree. And on the Freeman thing, I agree. I think that he would be in over Williams. I know that's going to frustrate a lot of fans. I also don't think he's very good anymore. I think he's fine, lower end replacement level running back 3, similar to TJ Yeldon. But I think out of the 3 of those running backs right now, I know people get frustrated with TJ Yeldon, and I think the narratives around his fumbling, you put out a tweet, the narratives around his fumbling are so overblown. It's not as big of a deal as we think it is. But I think he's probably the best all-around running back out of the 3 choices, and has the coach's trust to a degree, having been here for so long in the system, knowing it, that I really believe that he's going to be the one to go on Sunday.
Yeah, we'll see where it ends up. I think it's by far the most likely scenario of where those things end up. We'll figure out the right combination of where that falls out. But yeah, the Bills fans are always going to find some underdog story to latch onto. We've done it from the days of Derrick Rogers and Chris Hogan and Brandon Riley and Jeff Toole, and we'll always find a way to do it. It was Duke Williams last year, and now it's Antonio Williams. And again, the exact same as Dane Jackson. I'm very open to Antonio Williams getting some run next camp and to see if he's got a little bit more than this. That's great. I don't want to find out during a playoff game. I don't want to find out that he can't pass protect, and all of a sudden, on some screaming blitz, Patrick Queen mauls Josh Allen because we're hoping that Antonio Williams was a great pass protector, and we need to play him because I saw him get 10 carries against the Dolphins in the second half of Week 17. That's not something you roll the dice and find out in a playoff game.
And none of us are saying that he's not capable of these things. I think it's the unknown. Yes, what we're trying to say is that the unknown is the stuff that keeps me up at night, and I think keeps coaches up at night. And there's too much on the line, in my opinion, to roll out the unknown, because every snap's going to matter.
It's clearly Fred Jackson's fault. That is a very, very
100%.
Accurate statement. It's 100% Fred Jackson's fault. So as we go through this, you and I have both, I think, are closer into the spectrum of not exactly house money or pure gravy here, but we've checked our boxes. We came into the season saying
baby.
Yeah, we needed to win a division. We needed to host a playoff game. We needed to win a playoff game. Check, check, check. We got them. I think it's fair to say my expectations raised a little bit during the season, and that now I expect one more playoff win. I expect them to win on Saturday. I hope that they win, and I expect it. I think they should win. They're at home. They're favored. I think they're the better team between the two. They are not a significantly better team than the Ravens. The Ravens absolutely could win if these two teams played, 10 times. It's going to be pretty close, and there's going to be some shootouts back and forth. As you've weighed this back and forth and kicked it around, what do you expect to see? What's your prediction for this game?
Well, first, I agree. Expectations have changed. I think the Bills have all the makings to be a Super Bowl team. I think they're a team of destiny. We talked about going on a run at the right time is really important. They did that. They check all the boxes for what it takes to have a really special season and be a Super Bowl contender. And Josh Allen, the way he's playing, really puts him over that hump. It's him, Patrick Mahomes, and Aaron Rodgers. And one of those 3 is probably going to win the Super Bowl this year, in my opinion. So the Bills have every chance in the world to do that. They have the toughest road now, in my opinion, having to play Baltimore to get there. I think that's real. And so
back-to-back weeks, I think the Colts were the best team that any higher seed was playing last week. Absolutely. And the Ravens are the best team any higher seed is playing this week. Yeah. I think we have the toughest route to back-to-back weeks.
Absolutely. And I am not as confident in being able to say that they should win this game. I think they can win this game. I really do. If they did the 10 out of 10 times, I think it's 5. I think it's a coin flip.
Maybe 6-4.
Yeah, 6-4, 5-5. Like, this is this game interests me in a lot of ways. I really am having a hard time getting a read on it. I agree that it's going to probably be a high-scoring game. And what did he say? 34-31 Ravens.
34-31 Ravens. Yeah.
I have a 34-31 Bills. Yeah, so when he said that, I'm right there. I think there's going to be explosive plays, both by Lamar and Josh Allen. I think the defenses are each going to come up with a handful of big-time plays in this game. I think mistakes will be made. This is going to be, in my opinion, the way I'm visualizing this, one of these really fun divisional round games that I think this is the game of the weekend by far. And I think it lives up to the hype that we're saying. I don't think this one's going to come out and be a dud where the Ravens just roll over the Bills or the Bills just come out and just totally dismantle this Ravens team. I think you're going to see big haymakers back and forth. And this game, maybe even similar to that Ravens games we saw 3-4 weeks ago on primetime. I think you could see something like that where they're just haymakers, really fun, fascinating playoff game, and then the rest of the playoffs just kind of a dud.
I think it helps our search history if we talk about Lamar Jackson pooping. I think that helps people find the show.
Yeah.
So maybe that'll happen again, and somebody will have to go back to the locker room. I expect this to be a historic, fun game that we look back at years from now. I think, like you said, the haymakers, big plays in both directions. I think this Ravens defense gets Josh once. I think that the Bills defense gets Lamar once. I think that we could see a strip sack fumble. They've given up some pressures. They have some weak spots on their offensive line. I think there's a chance that we see a defensive score in this game. I think we see some stuff with some aggressive calls, maybe some 2-point conversions and things like that, maybe some weird scores. I'm calling Bills 37, Ravens 32. I think we see some weird stuff. I think we see a lot of big plays, both directions, in both offense and defense. I do think that there's enough talent and enough scheme that both teams take advantage of the middle of the field for the other squad that's there. And I think this could be one of those games where the team with the ball last wins, and that it could be one that maybe the Bills are down 32-31 and are driving down and could score on the last play of the game. I don't think that's out of the question to be able to put this kind of game together. And I think it's going to be a fun one we remember for a long time.
Yeah, I think he has one on maybe Tyler Bass's leg. They're driving down and Tyler Bass puts one through. Sort of a redemption, field goal kickers doing their job.
A couple questions here before we wrap things up. Bryce Elder, appreciate you very much. Can we bring back some Defensive Player of the Week AJ Klein action?
I don't want to. I mean, if he's back, it's a bad sign for Matt Milano. And I know Milano struggled last week. Lamar Jackson is a lot of things that are fantastic. He's not Phillip Rivers. Correct. And Phillip Rivers knew everything the Bills were doing ahead of time and was able to make them look silly. I think that the Bills are going to have a split second on Lamar when it comes to the decision-making stuff. And I think Milano's still too good in coverage, and dealing with Andrews is too much of a task to put Klein out there. I love Klein. I think he's great special teams. And then in stopping the run, I think the answer is still to have Taryn out on the field.
And if you're telling me I get to choose AJ Klein in space versus Lamar Jackson or Taron Johnson in space with Lamar Jackson, I'll take my chances that Taron Johnson can snag a leg and get him down.
Yep.
If there's any question that is going to be beat into the ground more than the running back question, it's how big of an impact is the weather going to have on this game on Saturday night?
I must just flip my table because no, dude, it's so ridiculous, man. It started like Monday. First of all, Monday, I don't know how weather is in other parts of the country where people live, but I've lived in the Northeast my whole life, and I've been in Buffalo now for 10 years or so. And if you're looking at the forecast on Monday for what's going to happen Saturday, that's foolish. For one, it's insanity. It changes like 24 hours.
If you think you know on Friday what's going to happen Saturday night, you're still guessing. You might have a more educated guess. You're still guessing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so that got taken and run with that one local weatherman, and I'm sure he's a good weatherman, but was said possible lake effect, and then just everybody lost their minds about what snow is going to do. And
how about Snowmageddon? The Snow Bowl game that everybody remembers against the Colts 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever it's been now. No one knew that was happening. No one knew that was happening.
Tickets. If I knew it was going to happen, I wouldn't have given away my tickets because I would have loved to have gone to a game like that.
People
I gave
were
them away.
tailgating, hanging out.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's a factor, but maybe it's literally nothing. There might be nothing going on during the game, and it's simply a chilly, January evening in Buffalo. We'll see where it goes.
As of right now, because now I'm following the weather because everybody's talking about it so much. But
I've updated it every day.
Yeah, we're seeing basically 0.2 inches of snow throughout the night, and most of it's going to be on the later end of the evening. It's going to be 34 degrees, which even if the snow is hitting the ground at that point, it's just wet. It's just going to be a little wet. 9 to 11 miles per hour. I mean, I could go outside right now and the weather's probably worse than it will be on the night of the game. And the wind in the stadium gets howling a little bit, but Josh is used to it. Everybody's kind of used to it. 9 to 10 miles an hour isn't going to be the difference with the wind. And it'll be cold. It's cold at night in Buffalo, but it's cold at night in every open air stadium in the Northeast. Baltimore, it gets cold there too.
Yeah,
so
it's cold in Kansas City. It's cold. It's cold in a lot of places.
Yeah.
It's winter. It's cold everywhere except for Miami.
If you're going to be this good of a football team as the Bills, I think are going to be for the next 10 years, even if they built a dome here in Buffalo, you're going to have to go to Pittsburgh. You're going to have to go to Cleveland. You're going to have to go to these places where it's also cold and potentially is going to snow. So it's something they're going to have to deal with at some point.
And on top of that, some of the biggest playoff games in history have been Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre putting up enormous passing games in the snow. Just because it snows,
400 yards in the snow in Kansas City.
Yeah, just because it snows doesn't mean that oh man, we're screwed now. It's ground and pound. No, it's not. Like if it's a blizzard and 40-mile-an-hour gusts, yes, then that's a concern. That's not what this is. Like we might have a little bit of snow. Maybe it looks pretty, and that's part of the career highlight we have for the game. Ken, we touched on this a little bit earlier. I
hate this. I'm sorry to take that question away from you, but
I
hate you, Nicholas.
It's something that I'm very much ready to look forward to the weather being totally normal and this being a non-starter.
All right, where was that question? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Ken was just asking about if the Ravens are so great on offense, why couldn't they score in their last 3 playoff games? I do think there's a thing to their schedule this year, and that I think that there's a chance there's a little bit of a paper tiger to them, and the fact that they only put up 20 points against the Titans' pretty poor defense is the thing. As Aaron reminded me, they also held the Titans' pretty fantastic offense to 13, and that's pretty awesome too. So it's hard to know which is which. I don't think they have a scary offense. I think their big offensive performances were only against bad teams. That doesn't mean they can't win this game, and the Bills don't have that great of a defense right now. So it still may net out.
So I was pounding the table as the playoffs were getting closer because everyone was scared of playing Baltimore in the first round. And I agree 100% that run they went on was way overinflated by the media. I heard NFL Network, CBS, everybody was just doing segments on this. Oh, the Ravens are back and all these rushing stats. And they played nobody. They really played nobody. And I know people say, well, who did Indy play at their end of the year? But Indy was a different type of team.
Much more consistent. Didn't have that slow start that Cole talked about with Baltimore.
Exactly. Now, the problem, I will say, is I think the Bills are a good defense. I like the Bills. I think they're trending in the right ways. I think where they struggle is giving up explosive runs. That's been their crux really all year. I don't even think they're that bad in the run game as a whole. It's the explosive runs. And that is, if Baltimore is going to have a big offensive game, it's giving up explosive runs to them. So that's where there's ability to score for them. But ultimately, the biggest fear of playing the Ravens should be their defense and what they are able to do. If they're on their game, to be able to slow down the Titans are right up there with the Bills in almost all statistical categories. In rushing impact, they're more balanced than the Bills are. And they really put a noose on everything they were trying to do. If you would have told me the Titans were going to score that few points in the playoffs in that first round, I would have laughed at you. And for their ability to do that does scare me about what they're going to be able to do potentially to the Bills offense. But as I predicted, I do have more faith in modern offense over everything else, and that the Bills, without a foot of snow, will be able to sort of have their way and score over 30 points, which I don't think the Ravens are going to be able to keep pace with that in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that as we get out of here for tonight, it's been great in the chat. You guys have been awesome. I think we see a good game. I think that we see a fun and exciting game. I think you're absolutely right. This is the game of the week. Every other podcast I've listened to, this is the game everyone is looking forward to the most. It's that prime time Saturday night game that everyone is going to be completely, laser focused on. And it's fun that our team is in one of those games. This is oftentimes people talk about the best weekend of football in the NFL or all season long. It's your 8 best teams, the 4 best games. You have full all-day football on Saturday and Sunday. And our team's a part of it. And our team is in the game that everyone is looking forward to playing. Just sit back and think about that. We now have a team that is in the game on the biggest weekend of football of the year, and we're in the game that everyone's looking forward to the most. It's been a long time coming.
2020, man. It's the weirdest, or 2021 now, but the weirdest 2 years in the history. So this makes sense that the Bills are the best team in the playoff games here, are the best games in the playoffs. What could be more 2020, 2021 than that?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. So any final thoughts for the people listening here as we get ready for this amazing game and the continuation of this fantastic season?
No, enjoy it, man. This has been a really cool experience for me. Again, I moved to Buffalo 10 years ago, and when I moved to Buffalo, my proclamation to all my friends that are New England fans was, I'm going to move there and everything's going to change and we're going to go on this great run. Well, I've been here now for almost 10 years and this is finally happening. And it's so cool to see the city. I was walking around my neighborhood sort of right outside of the city, and there was tailgates going on before the game, and people were just screaming, "Let's go Bills." People are screaming around me after the game. Their flags are up in places I didn't even know they had Bills flags in my neighborhood. Everybody's got a Bills flag out now. Every store you go to, everybody's just talking. I was at the doctor's office, and everybody's talking about the game. The fun buzz in the city right now. I wish I could trap it because I've never experienced anything like this. It's what I've always wanted to see. I've always heard, hey, when the Sabres were good, you should have seen this city. When the Bills were good, you should have seen it. Now we're seeing it. It's fun. It might not last till after Saturday, but I'm going to enjoy every minute of it while it is here and lasting, because it could go for another few weeks here. And that's the best. It's the best feeling. Everybody's in good spirits. So enjoy it. Be kind to each other. Try to be easy on each other during Twitter, during the game, because I think the Bills are going to be here for a while. I think we're going to get a lot of these games here over the next 10 years. I think they've got the right formula. Like we were talking about the Ravens doing it the right way. I think the Bills have the right formula to be that type of team that gets here consistently.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. You're going to see, like I said, the Bills had a very challenging schedule. They've had the toughest run through here. They're going to go on a run where they're going to end up playing, Phillip Rivers, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Aaron Rodgers, and that's a pretty impressive foursome to take down. As we go forward here, it's going to be fantastic. We appreciate you guys. Big thank you to our friends over at Uncle Jumbo's in West Her. You can find Aaron Quinn on Twitter at Aaron Quinn 716. You can find me on Twitter at Greg Tompsett. Find our new man, Max Robleski, at Mafia Numbers. We're going to tweet out some of his graphics here after the show. Going to be sharing some of the analytics and data of the Bills world here with you guys soon. But looking forward to it. You guys were awesome in the chat tonight. Aaron, anything else for the people?
Nah, go Bills.
Absolutely. Have fun. Go Bills. For Aaron Quinn and Greg Tompsett, you've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.